Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important updates that took place during the previous night of the local time. First we're going to talk about the village Ivanivske that located between Chasov Yar and Bakhmut Artyomovsk. According to most of the mappers, the Russians established control over the more than 50% of the village. They have established control over the central part, eastern part, and the, let's say, southern part. But according to geolocations, the Russians control a much less territory. And today, for example, we got the first geolocation from the Ukrainian sources. On the video that was added on this map, we can find 3 abandoned Russian tanks along the Artyom line in this area, which with the letter Z on board, which confirms the Russian progress. When talking about the eastern part and the northeastern part, we still haven't received any geolocations confirming Russian control over the territory. Furthermore, according to the Russian sources, during the day we're going to receive additional updates about the village, and very likely today we're going to receive the first flags from the central part and the western part of the village. And according to Russian reliable resources, the days of Ivanivske are numbered and the Ukrainians are planning to fall back very soon. Now we're moving to Avdiivka direction. We have additional updates from 3 settlements, Tonika, Orlovka and Berdachi. The Russian sources published the videos of series of strikes against the Ukrainian Abrams tank that was abandoned and destroyed a day ago in the western part of Berdachi. On this video we can see the first strike from behind, and in the second part of the video we see the strike from the frontal part of Abrams. Anyway, we see that there are still clashes. The Ukrainians managed to stabilize the line along the Durna River, and the Russians still haven't managed to establish complete control over these 3 villages. And when talking about Orlovka, the same story. The Russian attacks, the Ukrainian counterattacks, and the Ukrainians managed to stabilize the line of combat contact on the western part of the village. The same story we can see in Toninka. The Ukrainians managed to stabilize, and the northwestern part of the village still under Ukrainian control. Today we got additional videos of abandoned Ukrainian tanks and destroyed. This video was made by the Ukrainian soldiers who were moving along the streets, which confirms the Ukrainian control. So the question is, what is the reason? What are the reasons why the Ukrainians how the Ukrainians managed to stabilize the area? There are few reasons. The first of all, the Ukrainians redeployed significant number of reinforcements and reserves. They are not counting their losses, trying to stabilize the front line. The second reason is the water barriers in the main defense belt, and it's very difficult. There is not so many corridors the Russians can use for offensive operation. There are a lot of water barriers, rivers, so they need always to attack using the very short corridors. And the third, and probably the main reason why the Russians still haven't managed to establish control or complete the battles for 3 cities, for 3 towns, is to complete Ukrainian control over the main supply roads with FPV drones. For example, on this video we can see how the Russians were trying to redeploy additional reinforcements from Stepovo to Berdachi with tanks, armored vehicles, let's say personnel carriers, infantry troopers, assault troopers, and most of them during their way from one village to another among the fields were attacked by the Ukrainians FPV drone operators and by FPV drones. And we got the same video from the series video from Stepovo Berdachi line. This is the Russian main supply road that they can use for redeployment of forces, and this road is under complete control. We see the same video from Avdiivka, the 9th quarter, to Toninka. When talking about the line between Avdiivka and Orlovka, we have a lot of videos from 110th Brigade of how they were bombing and attacking the Russian soldiers, the Russian forces on this line, which confirms that it's very difficult to use this area for a deployment of forces. And this is one of the most important reasons why the Russians still haven't managed to establish control over the village. Basically, for now, it's very difficult to redeploy the forces from one point to another. Now we are moving further to the south to Krasnogorovka direction. The Russians continue offensive operation. We still haven't received additional updates or video geolocations confirming, let's say, complete control over the southern part. The only thing we got is the video from the Ukrainian sources of how they were trying to evacuate the wounded soldiers. The Ukrainians were moving along the railways, as you can see. This is the personnel carrier, and the personnel carrier was moving to the southern part to evacuate the soldiers, probably the 3rd Azov Brigade, that were wounded wounded or even killed during the battle for the southern part. And as you can see, this personnel carrier was under very heavy Russian artillery fire, Russian focus, which confirms that the clashes in this area are very heavy. But for now, with this area, most of the territory is covered with the fog of war, and it's very difficult to understand the real progress either of the Russians and the Ukrainians. Additional updates are coming from Novomykhailivka. After the Russians established control over more than 40% of the village, we continue receiving different updates with the flags confirming the progress of the Russians in this area. The Russian positions were stabilized and the Russians continue movements further to the western part. And today we got additional updates from pro-Ukrainian sources that very likely by the end of the day we're going to receive additional updates from the central part or even from the western. I'm talking about additional control of the Russian armed forces. Interesting updates are coming from Robotino. After the Russians answered Robotino, then they left, abandoned their positions in Robotino. Today, the Russian sources reported that on the 3rd of March, the Russians launched this second assault on Robotino with the purpose to establish complete control. And very likely today we're going to receive additional updates from the village. Maybe the Russians will be able to establish complete control over the territory. Now we are moving further to the northern part. We're going to talk a bit about the Sumy direction. Today we got very interesting video from the northern, the most northern probably settlement of Sumy area of Ukraine, and this is the settlement by the name of Stara Guta. On this video, for example, we can see how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions inside of the village. So you might say that there is nothing interesting, there is nothing new about the video, but there was a very interesting description to this video. And according to the description, the Russians were saying that the Russians were attacking the Ukrainian positions in the village by the name of Stara Guta with tanks from hidden positions. And this is very important because if we take a look at the, let's say, the border between Russia and Ukraine, and let's say if we take a look at the line of combat contact, there is just one area where the Russians can hide a very big army and stay invisible for the Western satellites and maybe for the Ukrainian intelligence. And we are talking about exactly the area, let's say, between the city by the name of Bryansk in Russia and let's say Sumy area. And this entire area, as you can see, is covered with a very big forest, and this big forest allows the Russians to concentrate significant army. And the first updates that the Russians started attacking some villages and positions of Ukrainian forces from hidden positions with tanks confirms that there are tanks on this direction. You know, when talking about the borderlines, I don't remember when the Russians attacked the territory with tank. Usually they use artillery, sometimes FPV drones, sometimes guided bombs, but not tanks. And the, let's say, presence of tanks in this direction probably can confirm additional or some plans of the Russian armed forces for this region and maybe possible offensive operation in this direction. If we increase the numbers of this since the beginning just of February, we're going to receive not February, but yes, from the beginning of February, we have some updates from the territory. We have additional fortifications from the Ukrainian side. We have CIA bases in this area. We have the picture of fortifications. We have some Russian, let's say, sabotage operations. We have bombing and clashes. So activity in this area is very big. And I'm just trying to tell that we need to pay attention to the area, because according to my understanding, if the tanks appears in the forest, very likely the Russians are about to start something on the north of Sumy and Chernigov area. Now we are moving further, and we got the additional updates from the United States of America. And according to the information we have, the Johnson gives house jobs Ukraine bakers room to craft plan as a pressure builds for floor vote. So according to information we have, the earliest time when the Ukrainians maybe will receive some additional help is going to be April or the late April, and very likely that even by the time the Western countries, the United States of America, the Congress will not finish the votings for the situation. And from the other side, we got some, let's say, comment from the former head of the US Armed Forces, General Mark Milley. He reported that Ukraine will face death if Congress does not pass an aid package. So everybody understands the critical situation. And regarding whether the Ukrainians are going to receive package or not, the Russians still have time, and they will try to use the time to achieve as much as possible and to deal such a damage to Ukraine that will lead to the situation that regarding the help the Western countries are able to provide, Ukraine will never stand on their legs once again. So this is the main purpose of the Russians, and the question is whether the Russians are able to do this, to complete this or not. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds you, we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.